Hello, my name is Tony. Hammer Studios once had a tight grip on the short hairs of the public's imagination. Its agenda was to turn out cheap lurid fare designed to tickle and stimulate an appetite for sex, violence, and vicarious thrills and shocks. Sure, it all looks tame these days, but in the 50s and 60s was considered pretty damn hot censor-baiting stuff. By the 70s, they were looking less sensational, old-fashioned, maybe even a bit tired and desperate. For a while, though, they were trailblazing and daring, and if you saw the Hammer logo on a poster, you had a good idea what you were in for, and the name alone sold the movie. As a fan, I'm not in the business of critically diminishing or talking down their output and their corner-cutting methods for keeping costs low, whilst giving the impression that their productions were more luxuriant and expensive than they were. That was part of their charm and their hook, and every so often they decided to up the ante, invest in something a bit different, something with a creative veneer hailing from a different class. The Devil Rides Out was one of those. They didn't pull out all the stops, didn't bestow it with a shitload of funding, go mega Hollywood reckless and abandoned on its ass, but they did raise their game with some care and thought, which resulted in one of their best and best looking films that failed at the box office of the time. So the lesson learned today, kids, is you can give the public champagne, smoked salmon and caviar, but if all they want is a full fat Coke and a greasy cheeseburger, McDonald's, here we fucking come. First, they paid out for the rights to Dennis Wheatley's 1934 novel of the same name. Then they drafted in American horror fantasy novelist and screenwriter Richard Matheson to deliver a screenplay. Hammer's great in-house composer James Bernard provided a booming, doom-laden score. Oft-used cinematographer Arthur Grant did his usual job of rendering the sumptuous visuals. And production set and art direction and design by Bernard Robinson is stepped up a good few notches in the creativity stakes. Old hand Terence Fisher was planted in the director's chair. Here's the deal narrative-wise. It's 1929 in the south of England, and the Duc de Richelieu, Christopher Lee, otherwise known as Nicholas to his nearest and dearest, greets his old friend Rex, Leon Green, as he lands his biplane in a field. The Duke is concerned for their young friend Simon Patrick Moore, the son of a fallen comrade they have been charged with mentoring and guiding through the storms and pitfalls of life. It appears they haven't done much of a stand-up job in this department, as Simon has bought a large country house with an observatory and gotten himself embroiled in a satanic cult led by MacArthur Charles Gray. Also in the cult is the attractive young medium Tanith Nikki Origi, companion to a trouty, boss-eyed countess, Gwen Franken Davis. Rex has met Tanith, an old cockeye, previously at a casino somewhere, and is clearly attracted to her. Tanith, that is, not Ben Turpin in a wig. MacArthur has a strong psychic link with and influence over both Simon and Tanith, and plans to baptize them as acolytes of Satan. Luckily, the Duke has a wide range of knowledge and experience in occult matters, so there's that asset on the side of the good guys. He and Rex disrupt the Satanic May Day ceremony on Salisbury Plain, in which MacArthur summons up the devil in the form of the Goat of Mendes. Not Sam Mendes, he's another sort of goat. Blasting in by car, the Duke and Rex rescue Simon and Tanith, whilst Rex throws a crucifix at the goat, causing it to implode. How's that for ramming it home? Blowing the old horn, butting up against adversity. They regroup at the country manor of the Duke's niece Marie, Sarah Lawson, and her husband Richard, Paul Eddington, where they live with their daughter Peggy, Rosalind Landor. Whilst the Duke goes to London to do some research on matters of the occult, MacArthur turns up at the house and casts his mesmeric influence over Marie. He induces Simon to strangle Richard and Tanith to stab a sleeping Rex. Before they can complete the murders, Peggy rudely bursts in, as kids do, and breaks the psychic link. MacArthur leaves, but warns Marie that although he won't be back, something will. The scene is set for a battle against the forces of black magic and evil. The Duke, Simon, Marie and Richard face off against demonic attacks in a protective circle, whilst Peggy stays in bed and Rex and Tanith are off in a barn somewhere. If they break the circle, they are doomed, so MacArthur casts illusions to draw them out, such as a giant spider menacing Peggy, but it doesn't work. The Angel of Death is conjured up as a last resort. The Duke repels him with an incantation, but as the angel can't return to wherever he came from empty-handed, Tanith dies in the barn. Hey-ho, swings and roundabouts. A bit pissed at his failure, MacArthur kidnaps Peggy to use as a human sacrifice in a satanic ceremony. The Duke calls upon the spirit of the recently deceased Tanith to possess and communicate through Marie, providing a clue as to the whereabouts of MacArthur. Simon decides tries to go it alone and rescue the girl as he thinks everything is his fault, which it is, Simon, you twat. He's a weak-willed sap and is almost instantly under McCarter's influence again. The Duke, Rex, Richard and Marie bust in on the ceremony, but McCarter is too strong to defeat. He is about to plunge a sacrificial dagger into Peggy. On the bright side, at least she's in a trance and oblivious, like most kids. Tanith possesses Marie again and wakes Peggy, leading her in a recitation of a spell which visits divine retribution upon McCarter and his cultists. They are destroyed by lightning bolts and their coven room transformed into a pop-up church. Cut to the Duke and the others awakening in the protective circle. The Duke explains that the spell has reversed time. Tanith is alive again, so Rex now has someone to pump. Simon and Peggy are safe. McCarter's spell to invoke the Angel of Death has backfired on him. He's a goner and will face eternal damnation. That Angel of Death is a bit of a stickler for the rules, you know, and can't go home empty-handed. The Duke adds that they must thank God for their salvation. First, let me say that the Devil Rideout is something you don't want to approach objectively. If you're looking for sense and an internal logic that makes sense, don't go wasting your time and energy. There ain't none of that here. It is hokum, hogwash, bunkum, codswallop, and that's without any shadow of a doubt. Either you accept it in that knowledge and on those terms, otherwise steer well clear. In that context, it is no different from most every other Hammer movie ever made. It's a horror fantasy and it knows it and is not going to give any concession to rational scrutiny. About such things it does not care, not even the slightest pretext of caring. Bit like me in that respect. The acting is broad and arch across the board. Chris Lee towers, broods and glowers in what was, for him, a rare heroic role. Leon Green is as square-jawed a sidekick as any square-jawed sidekick in cinema has ever been square-jawed. Nikki Origi is undeniably pretty as the female glamour, but not your usual bosom-heaving Hammer beauty. More a flat-chested 20s flapper type. Figuratively speaking, Sarah Lawson is closer to their usual stamp, but she is portrayed as a motherly figure rather than an arbitrary sex object. So, nothing for the red-blooded heterosexual males to get too hot and bothered about. Patrick Mower is one-dimensional and bland, but I guess his character isn't intended to be a powerhouse of charisma and intellect, more an easily manipulated dupe. Interesting to note that Mower is the only one of the cast still alive and working today. He's been in the long-running Brit soap Emmerdale since 2000. He holds an eternal place in my nostalgic affections for playing the ruthless assassin Cross in Callan, undercover cop Haggerty in Special Branch, and violent detective Hackett in Target. Christopher Lee dominates the proceedings though, and Charles Gray runs him a close second as the ultra-urbane and super silky Satanist with a bright-eyed hypnotic stare and deeply smouldering arrogance. There is less emphasis on sex and violence than you would find in most Hammer outings, more a focus on mood and atmosphere and evoking a sense of disquiet and unease. Matheson's script doesn't go in for outright sensationalism or waste time with indulging the usually prolonged skepticism of characters. You know, the stock, surely you can't believe in all this superstitious nonsense? I certainly can, and don't call me Shirley. Whilst the mechanics of the script grinds away to slowly convince them incrementally. No, the existence of the black arts, spiritualism, the devil and his minions are declared concrete pretty quickly, which levels the pace of the story arc quite nicely. Despite the ropey back projection and the less than seamless superimposition of the special effects animations, The Devil Rides Out looks a treat. The gorgeous observatory set is an absolute sodding knockout, and all those gleaming vintage motors must be an orgasmic sight for the eyes of antique petrol heads the world over. It is a bright, bold and intense visual experience, slathered in a great period feel, dripping with nouveau gothic elegance. Dennis Wheatley was pleased with it and gifted Lee a signed first edition copy of his book. It was retitled The Devil's Bride in the States, so dim bulbs wouldn't go in expecting a western and wonder where the fuck John Wayne or Randolph Scott was. In the UK, the trailers and posters decked in satanic horror flick imagery were considered informative enough for even the dumbest of punters. Later devil movies, The Exorcist apart, would end with the triumph of evil or a shock footnote finale of the just when you thought it was all over variety. The Devil Rides Out, with its paternalistic themes and emphasis on protecting the young and vulnerable, concludes with the conquest of Christianity over over the forces of evil. So, like The Exorcist, it has a pro-Christian message to lay on you, which is, I suppose, simpatico with its more comparatively serious tone. The Devil Rides Out is one of Hammer's most polished efforts, with an emphasis on creepiness and emotional manipulation in place of gore and titillation. Not that I don't love gore and titillation, I do, but an occasional change in modus can be both positive and refreshing. Christopher Lee cited it as one of his favourite films, going so far as to suggest he'd like to see it remade with modern special effects and himself playing a mature Duke de Richelieu. I don't know about that, I really like it just the way it is. Thank you as always for your time and attention. Do whatever you want to do next. Hit like, don't like, comment, subscribe, be a patron on my Patreon thing. Make a financial contribution via the thanks button. I will be back as soon as I return. Take care for now, pilgrims.